No, es que no se puede. Nella divento c'è hospital CEO stai vai ko hawaso nei se boy so se boy gonna hanya ne always such scan out to nothing ne dwe he ya ska and dwe ko and go ska and to no hanya ne yani o to ko and go ta ne dwa to yi se hawan se de to no ha de to no ko ne go to se ne ha ko go den wan ho no ne yani o to ko and go ta ne dwa to yi Haudenosaunee touch Navy, set down 100. Then way you said we're nothing down. Scott, you to nothing on it, the end of your tongue point to go. Down here, draw true, civil go on, it's gonna die. One I touch what, I need to sign 1%, no, some going. One end, I was for the number. In the way you said we're nothing, civil go on, it's gonna die, and the end of your tongue point to go. Down there in our tree, they ningo dog, they had to kill no. They scan no, I do not know. They didn't do it, this is one on your tree, kill no, you can't. They didn't know some got to go. Down there in our tree, Gayogohó, they now reason why this. They sort of sat down, they scan no, I do not know. They didn't do it, this is one on your. Come a day now, reason why this, and they didn't know some got to go. I told the guy where he gave the guy back up to know John Station St. George, Fairbrand, Cornell. Honored to do the opening for these outstanding young ladies. Here you have it.
Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's so great to see such a full house coming out for such an exciting event that we've been looking forward to for months now. My name is Leslie Logan. I'm Seneca Deer Clan from Cattaraugus. I'm the Associate Director of the American Indian and Indigenous Studies Program, and just can't tell you how happy we are to celebrate International Women's Day today with an Indigenous women's bent to it. Some of you may or may not know that the International Women's Day started in the early 1900s. About 1908, about 15,000 women marched through the streets of New York City, really angling for women's rights, talking about oppression and inequality, looking for better pay and voting rights. So International Women's Day was really born out of oppression and inequality. Today, 115 years later, we still fight for equality, we still fight against oppression, and today we're still fighting for a woman's right to choose and for reproductive rights. But International Women's Day is also a day of celebration. It's a day of activism. It's a day to increase visibility of women's achievements. For some, International Women's Day, you call it Indigenous Women's Day, because I feel like it is. But that's For some, it's about fighting for women's rights, but for others, it's about reinforcing key commitments. While International Women's Day is also about celebrating success and women's achievements. Today, ASP is taking the opportunity to celebrate Indigenous women. And we're acknowledging the impact of Indigenous women and their influences on the early suffragist movement. We also honor contemporary Indigenous women, such as Louise McDonald that we have here today, and Jonel Beauvais, both Mohawk from Haudenosaunee, who work every day to support Indigenous women across the spectrum, from youth to elders, with traditional knowledge through culture-based, community-driven programs and cultural initiatives that support women spiritually, culturally, emotionally, for women's health, growth, and well-being. For Haudenosaunee women, in our historic experience, our women's roles were markedly different from non-Native women's. Our Haudenosaunee communities were matriarchal and remain matrilineal, as Louise will detail. Our culture and traditional systems valued women in unique and elevated ways. So much so, in 1848, a group of abolitionist activists, mostly women, but some men, gathered in Seneca Falls to discuss women's rights. It was really sort of referred to as the problem of women's rights. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and others met with and borrowed from the Haudenosaunee system that placed a higher value on women. Over time, some things change, but for the most part, women still maintain central roles in traditional leadership and decision-making. For many non-Native women, throughout history, it has been decades or centuries of a struggle for rights and power. Women in the US right now are on a roller coaster ride of gaining incremental rights, followed by setbacks, becoming empowered, and then having the most basic rights come under attack and our rights diminished. Last year, the Mothers of the Seneca Nation, a grassroots organization that I helped to reignite on the Seneca territories of Cattaraugus and Allegheny, we held an Indigenous International Women's Day event to commemorate Seneca women's grassroots efforts and celebrate our contributions and bring about positive change in our communities. I said then, and I say now, we are not empowered, we are power. Louise McDonald Herne and Jonel Beauvais will talk more about this power. And with that, I now introduce you to Marina Zephyrs, Akwesasne Mohawk, a second-year PhD student in information science with a minor in American Indian and Indigenous Studies, who will give you a more detailed introduction to our women of honor today.
Thank you, Leslie and ACE for coordinating today's events. Hello and welcome everyone joining us both in person and online. Marina Jungiats, Akwesasne Nidawakganu, Wagakahuni. My name is Marina Johnson Zephyrs. I'm Mohawk Wolf Clan from Akwesasne, and I have the honor of introducing our speakers today, Louise McDonald Herne and Jonel Beauvais. Louise is the condoled Bear Clan mother for the Mohawk Nation Council and has worked to empower our youth, women, and families through Haudenosaunee cultural instruction and ceremony through founding the Gayogohó, the We Sustain Life programs. Not only does she educate within our community, but regularly lectures at universities throughout Canada and the United States on Haudenosaunee philosophies, specifically highlighting the vital role women and self-determination plays in our culture. In 2020, she was featured in Gayogohó Fox's award-winning documentary film, Without a Whisper, about Haudenosaunee women's influence on the women's rights movement. Louise has been a distinguished scholar in Indigenous learning at McMaster University's Institute for Innovation and Excellence in Teaching and Learning, and has presented at the UN's Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and carries an honorary PhD from SUNY Canton. Our next panelist, Jonel, is Wolf Clan from Akwesasne and the founder of the Welcome Home Circle. The Welcome Home Circle is dedicated to supporting those directly and indirectly impacted by the criminal system, especially in Native communities. She is actively working on the Tiny Home Project, which will provide peer support and safe housing to ensure those coming home get the opportunity to demonstrate transformational justice. Jonel was a recipient of the 2020 Visionary Voice Award granted by the National Sexual Assault Resource Center. The same year, she was accepted to be on the national cohort of women through Columbia University's Women Transcending Fellowship. And in 2020, she received an award from the Women's Institute for Leadership and Learning for her dedication to raising the voice of women through personal accountability. Both of our panelists are lead organizers in Gayogohó We Sustain Life programs, which carries 4 grassroots community initiatives. Ohologo, the Under the Husk Rites of Passage and Coming of Age Ceremony. Gawaji Leyatu, supporting our families of Ohologo. Yongyosutta Anide Galagwa, the Moon Lodge Society. And Gayogohó, Our Seeds Are Ancient. All to be discussed further in today's panel. This evening on International Women's Day, we are here not only to celebrate the accomplishments of these 2 incredible women, but highlight the long legacy of Haudenosaunee women whose footsteps they follow. And with that, I'll pass it to our panelists.
So, can everybody hear me pretty good back there? Okay. Sego se wakwego wakalagasti and yet soxkaleo Akwesasne to Wakano, Taramakatsuni, Nuwa Chigang get at the
Kwe, kaya na hawi sundia, so ka kaya hiwani ya kusas na degito. Yeah, I do.
Okay. We always like to uplift the energy in the room with a sound, and I've asked Jonel to lead here.
Yeah, so I recently I've been singing the Gayogohó, which honors the 4 sacred beings, and so I just think it speaks to our vibration about how we were inclusive to everybody. There was never a moment in time when we didn't think about the collective and to be inclusive and to think about everybody. If we were to honor every direction, that means we had to honor every direction that people had homes and families. And so I just wanted to sing 4 sacred beings, and in the song it just asks that it looks over all of us and all of our families. And I just like to bring you in that way, because that's how, you know, we've been able to survive all this time, is thinking about each other. So Gaeli Wanduga Asquayana Waze Zayadanu Nanea Kwajile Owanduga Asquayana Waze Yo-ho, yo-ho, hana yo-ho, we-a-he. Yo-ho, yo-ho, hana yo-ho, we-a-he. Yo-ha, yo-ho, yo-ha, yo-ho, hana yo-ho, we-a-he. Yo-ho, hana yo-ho, we-a-he.
Meow, meow, meow. So you might as well just stay up here with me, Gayogohó. As we begin, you know, I just want to thank Marina for that excellent introduction. I'm like, holy cow, who are these women? I don't know them, but you know, it's it's pretty extraordinary to reflect upon the work. And you know, a lot of the work that we do, I don't want to call it a program because it's a kind of colonial kind of word. I just like to say it's what we live. It's our life ways, huh? And because a program has a beginning and an end, but ours is forever in perpetuity of what our grandmothers left us and what we're going to leave for our granddaughters. And just quickly, I want to introduce my granddaughter here because she's a character and a half. This time. This is my little Yesatsalina. She's 5 years old. Just say go. She's my entertainment for a drive down here. But anyways, you know, I just want to say nyawihau to all of you for this wonderful opportunity to speak here again at Cornell. I've been here a couple times, but you know, right from the get-go, I want to, you know, let Cornell know that I work with young adolescent women in my community, and I often say that Jonel are in the trenches with our people, our children, and our mothers. And I always tell these young women, I say, walk this land like you own it, because you do. And so part of that is to build within them a core value about the historical relevance, about the territories that we transverse. And you know, my husband and I came down from up on the Canadian border into Vermont, and we drove down here, and I said, this is all Mohawk land, all of it. And as my granddaughter was sitting in the back, you know, I want her to know that. And it was never ceded or given up. And so when she grows and has children of her own, I want that kind of narrative to be deeply embedded into her psyche and never think of herself anything less. But anyway, so I want to get into this PowerPoint. It's a recycled PowerPoint from Harvard, so sorry, Cornell. Alrighty, so founding fathers, United States. Well, what predates them is the founding mothers. And I want to just acknowledge these women here that have greatly influenced me, which is my own mother here on the bottom corner, Gayogohó. She was a clan mother. And the other clan mother was Audrey Shen from Onondaga, and the Wasanta Alice Papineau from Onondaga, and our own Wolf Clan sister cousin Mohawk midwife Gaji Cook, who husband Jose Barrero also taught here for many years here at Cornell, right? So, America. Has anybody ever seen this picture before?
I do.
Yeah, she did. So what really blew my mind when I first seen this is that this is a really old picture painted by an artist when apparently shortly after Christopher Columbus landed on this hemisphere, and their artists had to go back and show their king and queens what America looked like. And oddly enough, he painted an indigenous woman who had tobacco leaves for her skirt and a feathered headdress, and she was bare-breasted, and you can see how robust she is. But she's also in her complete dominion, which means that this entire hemisphere of indigenous people was founded on the foundation of the mother. So I really like this picture because it says to me what I know to be true is here in this very painting, and this is America. And then shortly she went through an evolution and she became Uncle Sam. And slowly but surely they did a gender flip on what America looked like. Okay, and so, you know, I'm a Condole clan mother for the Bear Clan in the Mohawk Nation, and people often ask me, you know, how did I become a clan mother, and why is the matrilineality of Haudenosaunee women so solid in the foundation of who we are as a nation and as a people? Because right from the get-go, we had a woman called Ojijizo fell from a celestial opening in the sky world. And so right from the very beginning, it wasn't Adam and Eve, it was our sky woman named Ojijizo, which means she's a mature flower. And she fell here right after the big deluge, after the big flood. And she brought with her our consciousness and seeds from the sky world. And she landed on a turtle's back. And so she created for us this earth. So our very genesis, our very beginning began with a woman and not with a god or with a man, but very much a mother already in waiting for a child. And so right from the get-go, Haudenosaunee women are procreators and cultivators because she brought those seeds. The picture here to my right is my sister cousin Gaji Cook, again, the midwife, and we're looking at wampum belts here in Six Nations. And you know, those are the things that I believe women, we should not be afraid to fall, because every cycle that a woman is in, every month, there's a recurring fall. And that's when the ovum falls from the ovary to embed itself in fertilization or just in the shedding. So part of that story repeats itself biologically in every woman every month, according to the full moon cycle. So I want to talk a little bit. I know you want me to touch on the Haudenosaunee woman's influence on the early suffering women. I call them suffering women, but the suffragettes, I guess. And so, you know, Euro-American women had to see something. And my good friend Sally Roche Wagner up at SU, you know, finally said through her privilege as an academic and as a white woman to be able to say that, you know, her 40 years of research, she's seen in between the lines a different kind of way. And it was through her work that she gave me a lens into the past. What I already knew was already there in between the lines of the early suffering women's writings. So anyways, Euro-American women were really impressed with the high status of Haudenosaunee women. And we treated them equally, and they didn't think of their right to freedom in their own constitution until they've seen something else. And so I just want to give a shout out to Sally and to John Thomas Gayogohó for painting this picture here of the corn beans and squash, the very concentric circle of our gardens and of our women, and how we weave women's webs of women's wisdom into everything that we do. And here's our Miss Jonel. Isn't she fabulous?
Janelle, what's it behind you?
I have a side commentary here, but anyways, you know, so these women couldn't fathom how they dared to dream their own revolutionary dream, as Sally wrote, based on the perfect equality of all people, with women absolute sovereigns of their lives, to believe that it was an achievable goal. So there was a lot that was written but wasn't written, but existing between those lines. And sometimes I believe that you have to go beyond the written word. And I know Haudenosaunee people are oratory, founded on one's ability to remember in exact details historical events that happened to us. And usually they were the women. You know how men say women never forget when they're mad at you? Well, we never forget the history of our people either. So part of our Haudenosaunee ways, and I just want to acknowledge there's a couple of chiefs in the room, our Ludianissos, one did the opening Sam, and also Spence, who's way back there, who's from Onondaga, you know. It feels so good to have our own counterparts, our men in the room. Wow, it's a rare treat for us, so Nyaweha for that, because, you know, usually we're siloed away or working on different things that we don't really intersect a lot, but I really appreciate you being in the audience today, so Nyaweha. So anyways, Haudenosaunee women, with our Sky Woman who came down and created the earth that we know as today. Shortly thereafter, Haudenosaunee, the great thinker, established within us a foundational law, and he invested it in the women, and that's through our clanship. So when we think about a longhouse, which is where we used to live and is now our ceremony house, is that you can't have your walls and your roof unless you have a solid foundation, and the women are foundational. So part of that original beginning was he invested the clan titles in the elder women in our nations. And so he gave her that absolute sovereignty over the society of our people. She controlled the commerce of our people. She had her hand on the national treasury. She planted colossal cornfields, was in charge of the distribution of that corn to make sure that nobody in our society went hungry and that everybody was taken care of. And then when the great law, the peacemaker in Hiawatha brought the great law to us, and we hear a lot about these guys, but it's rarely talked about Jagusaze, who was also a woman within the story that was the pivotal character that ensured that the message of peace was delivered to the Haudenosaunee. And within her, he's seen her, not just her beauty, but her brilliance, and invested in the women since that day, the status of the children, and the title to the lands. So land cannot be ceded or sold or given away unless the women approve. And not only that, a man couldn't rise to leadership unless there was a uterine voice backing it up. So she had, and this is our right of nomination belt, she could present the belt to say she has a chief ready to stand up. And a man doesn't rise to his leadership unless a woman puts him there. And she has the full power of recall, which means if he goes on his own agenda and his own shenanigans, then she has the right to call him back. Now imagine if the United States had women to have the power of recall in their leaders or in their president. I think it would be high time to institute that law. Okay, so it was clearly a division of power between the sexes in the Indian Republic. It was nearly equal, but the Iroquois family structure demonstrated women's superiority in power for the white woman living in a world where marital rape was commonplace. Women's violence-free and empowered home life must have looked like heaven to the early Euro-Canadian, where am I from, Canada? Them too, from, American women here in the US. I'm sorry, I live right up on the border and it's like different place. Anyway, so the great women, the suffering women were Matilda Johnson Gage, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mott, who were in Syracuse, right? And went back to Seneca Falls and created the history of women's fight and women's right to vote in the United States Constitution. But it came from them seeing something else. And that came from our grandmothers, our great-great-grandmothers, right, Janelle? How? Okay, so no such thing as rape. And usually, the Haudenosaunee back in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, we would take in captives. And often there were children or there were women. And so the white women that came to live with us when they turned the age of 18 or became an adult woman was given the opportunity to go back to the Euro society, but she chose not to go because she realized that she was freer as a white woman in the Indian world than she was as a white woman in the white world. So please don't take offense for my use of white, but this is the world where we live in, where there's multiple narratives on how we address each other. And for me, I'm just trying to stay true to the narrative is that, it's time that, because I have to struggle within myself that as a kid, I was told I'd be better off being a white girl than I was as an Indian girl. And so, and I also believe that I should never say the word white because I could get hit or be punished for it. But those days are over, so here we go. Okay, so roots of democracy, clanship founded in the sisterhood builds a foundation. So the foundation be the women, and then the walls and the roof became the brotherhood, which is our chief system, which doesn't exist unless the women says it to be so. All right, I want to talk about Gayogohó. She was our first clan mother. She was a great peace woman, head clan mother of the nation. She would wear a cape covered with freshwater pearls, and these pearls would become a representative of purity and peace. Her cape became a symbol of her office and position as the head of the clan mothers of the Confederacy. She's on the same equivalent as Haudenosaunee. Haudenosaunee in our Confederacy is the chief that got transformed from being a bad guy to a good guy. And she's on that equivalent. So, but because European mindset could not comprehend, the European male mind could not wrap his mind or comprehend how women could have political voice, could think through political situations, and coming from Europe where a woman was a possession of him, less than him, he just could not get this into his head. So there was a lot of measures to do away with the office of Gayogohó, and it has been vacant since the mid-1800s. The last known Gayogohó was Carolyn Parker, back I believe around 1888, who was a sister to Ellie Parker Seneca. But Mama Bear has it her way. That office will be refilled. So Gayogohó and Haudenosaunee and the great transformation of Haudenosaunee. So this is my take on the Great Law, is that in order to transform a twisted, evil mind, you have to look back to when that man was a baby, and something occurred at the time of his birth. He was born with anomalies, and they said he had 7 crooks in his body and 2 rows of teeth, and as he grew, he had snakes in his hair, and he was greatly feared, where we are in Ithaca, through all these rolling hills here, this Haudenosaunee was feared because he was a sorcerer, he was a murderer, he was even a cannibal. And a lot of the people that lived here pre-Columbus feared him. And so when I think about this, and this is my own take, is what happened, what makes somebody so evil, because most of us who are born are not that evil. Something had to happen. So to me, when I look at this story of Haudenosaunee and Jagoosizek, my personal view, reading between the lines, is that Jagoosizek was Haudenosaunee mother. And it was that guilt that she lived, that she went on to promote war. And Haudenosaunee, being a little boy about the age of 5 or 6, abandoned on an island because the mother thought the best thing for her son was to let him die. And she left him to die on an island, but he didn't die. And he lived, but then he became this evil man. And so when the Great Law of Peace came to the Haudenosaunee, the peacemaker took his message, and one of the first, maybe the second or third person that he introduced the message to was Jagoosizek. And she realized how important his good message was, and the peacemaker also realized that he could not continue to unify these 5 great nations without her. And so they went about to the nations, taking the message of peace, but they had to come to the day when they had to approach Haudenosaunee. And because he was such a wicked, evil sorcerer, he was able to flip their canoes in the water and drown all the warriors that attempted to approach him. Then came the day when the peacemaker says, we can't proceed to see Haudenosaunee on his island unless we have Jagoosizek. And when Jagoosizek arrived, he asked her for her song. And she gave her song over to the peacemaker, and he sang it. And when Haudenosaunee heard her song, he calmed down because it reminded him of when he was a little boy and the song of his mother singing this lullaby. And it was enough to calm him down, to be approachable. And it was her who combed the snakes out of his hair. And it was the chiefs, Hiawatha, the peacemaker, who straightened out his body, his deformities. But it was a moment when it became a repairable relationship between Jagoosizek and her son. And that's why even today, thousands of years later, we still have a Haudenosaunee at Onondaga. And it's through the generations that seat in the office has never gone vacant and has always been refilled. But, I think through colonization and its oppressing waves did away with Jagoosizek. And it's time to bring her back in her full glory and her full authority, because she rightfully belongs to the world right now, as wars are on the cusp of a 3rd World War. We need the mothers. We need this office of a peace mother to bring peace again, not just to our communities, but to all the world, because there's a way to do it. Right now in Seneca Falls, my good friend Diane Shenandoah helped create this clay model. It's called Ripples of Change. It features Laureate Cornelius Kellogg, who is a Haudenosaunee Oneida Wolf Clan woman. Was she Wolf Clan? Yeah, Wolf Clan. And Harriet Tubman, Martha Coffin Wright, and Sojourner Truth. So it's a beautiful display. I think it's done all in bronze over at Seneca Falls. But this is just a recording of the history that's more inclusive of what actually happened at the time. And the Haudenosaunee woman is a standalone because she's separate from the women that came across the saltwater ocean. So peace is an intricate weave woven by the hands that choose it. And I really like this because, I always say that women are carriers of wisdom. We have occasion gatherings where we weave women's wisdom into a place of knowing with our daughters and our granddaughters and the women of our community. And because in Haudenosaunee we have a multitude of basket weavers, right? Some really great baskets get made there. But for me, we have to constantly look at that skana, that Gayogohó, and that Gayogohó. So the peace, the power, and the good mind. For us, those are primordial principles. They're three very basic principles that we live by. So if you come into this room with a good mind, and I'm going to give you a better good mind to leave with, then that's my evaluation. If you leave this room and you feel peace in your heart and your mind, then I've done my job. And if you leave this room so empowered, then I have done my job. But really, we're really in society, in the world, everywhere that you look. Here on National Women's Day, it's so important for women to know who they are. And I wrote an article a couple months ago when Roe v. Wade got reversed. And I just came from the viewpoint of an Indigenous woman, which to me, that whole argument doesn't exist in an Indigenous world, in an Indigenous woman's world. Because women stand at the door of life and death. And she can choose of her own will whether it's going to be death or whether it's going to be life. Even in Haudenosaunee processes, women could call for war or they could call for peace because they were in charge of the warriors too. So that whole process is to be understood in a way that we have a lot of work to do as women. And in that Roe v. Wade, I know that if a woman comes to a moment where she finds herself with life and determines herself that she's unable to care for that life, she has the power vested in her own body to gently return it to the sky world. You don't need a doctor. You don't need a law. You don't need a whole council of men to tell you what to do with your body. You're in charge of your own. And so that whole argument in Indigenous women's world doesn't exist because we know already that within the heart and within the womb of the woman, she has the control. It ain't nobody else's business but hers. So just letting y'all know that argument kind of silly to me, I guess, and at the extent that it gets to. But women need to be empowered. And often when I give talks, non-Native women or white women ask me, well, how is it that we can walk like a Haudenosaunee woman? Well, we've got to really think about what we do in this life, and the narratives that we sell ourselves. I says, if you really want to change the trajectory of your future, then quit taking your husband's last name. Quit taking your father's last name, because that's a paternal order vested in the possession of you. And I know it's hard to wrap your mind around that because sometimes we put a lot of value into being the daughter of somebody great or being the wife of somebody great. Well, for me, my grandmothers had no last name. We had clans, and that was our last name. And when I grew up, last names weren't a big thing. It was when the Indian agent came into our villages and started assigning, "Honor Spence, see you on the range." So anyways, we need to rethink that. We really need to rethink that, ladies, My husband's here and I have his last name. Thank you. My children have his last name, but I'm really rethinking that. We have a mother, whose last name, who fought vital statistics in the Canadian government to only have one name. So if Cher and Prince and Madonna can have only one name, why in the world can't we have just one name? Like, let's really think about this. But anyways, I could go on forever, go this way, that way, and all around and really say nothing. But anyways, the work at home, we do a lot of work with the women in the Moon Lodge. We restored our coming of age ceremony called Gayogohó, which is a puberty rite for our adolescents. We do a lot of women's work. We do healing circles. We do a lot of art, and we do a lot of one-on-one. And Jonel can really dive into that a lot more. But here we are on International Women's Day. But somebody said to me before I left, every day is International Women's Day. But I'm really calling and challenging all the women in this audience. It's time for a new alliance. And I had a dream some 20 years ago that women met on a mountain when the day and the night were equal. And there the women gathered and they prayed for 10 days for the earth, Mother Earth, to have pity on us, because our climate was getting so dire. 10 days of continuous ceremony, and we asked for her pity. And that was Mother Earth, because we're heading for a place of no return. So I challenge you as women, if anybody can change the trajectory, it's going to be us, but it's going to be based upon how well we work together and how we arrive at the same moment with the same prayer, with the same ceremony, to say, we are the medicine. We are the power that this world needs. Sonia Woodhull, thank you for your time and attention. I'll hand it over to Jonel.
Jonel Beauvais and how we soon get some. Before we get going, I've got Gayogohó children standing up in the back. There's seats up in the front here. I want you to come down here because you deserve to sit at the front of the room. These are the people that I work for. These are my bosses right here. So I often say that I work for the children, and I report back to them. So, boy, I'm so glad you made it. So I just want, I have a lot to say and a little bit of time to say it, but in the beginning, I've got a lot of different pieces to my personal experience. But in one of them, I really started after serving a couple years in a maximum security prison. Just prior to that, New York State tried to send me to a maximum security prison for 12.5 years. And just prior to that sentencing, I had buried my mother, who had passed away from ovarian cancer because there was a ton of PCBs dumped in our community, and a lot of my peers, our parents, have died, and there's a lot of cancer in the community. So we've had to bury our parents, and it's been very painful trying to grow up and have no mother. And thankfully, prior to that experience, the only thing I could tell you about me is that I represented every horrendous statistic that we have about Indigenous women. I didn't have any accolades. I just had a lived experience of violence and tragedy and misfortune, but I had women who loved me dearly. And that's why I get to stand up here today, and I'm only a representative of the love that my mother gave me and my grandmother. And I do my best to represent what they gave me. So I fought New York State and I won. I fought New York State and I won, and I got out of that prison, and the minute I popped out of that prison, I ran into Gayogohó. And she took me in, and she gave me a nice welcome home. And that was very odd to me because at the time when I had met her, I was still 11G0437 because that's who I was in the prison. I was not a person, I was not a woman, I was property of New York State. I did not have the ability to give consent. I did not have the ability to have physical interaction with another human being. I did not have the ability to even connect with women that I had built very strong relationships within the prison. And so with that, she invited me to Oahulogo, and she gracefully, walked me in there and told me to share my story and my truth, and today is no different. She told me that if I was going to speak about anything, if I was going to speak to the people, that as a speaker, I have 3 obligations to give you. I'm to give you truth, humility, and humanness. And that I have not done that. It is your job to tell me. I am here holding myself accountable, holding myself responsible for this moment and for these children that are up here. It's been a long ride and a long journey, but I can tell you that today I carry skana, I carry peace with me. And I began to figure out how to transform pain to power. So while I was incarcerated, I also left behind 3 children, an 18-month-old, a 4, and a 5-year-old. And so today, if I were to tell you, if I carried any title, if you wanted to know anything about me, I am a mother to 3 beautiful human beings that I take full responsibility for. I also wanted to enter in this space, and I also wanted to make sure, like some of you might see every now and then when you're trying to get on a website or you're trying to log into something, I want to know who here is a robot. Okay. I also want to know who here is a human being. Am I dealing with human beings? Just raise your hand. Okay, good. So I know how to talk now. I am not a robot. I am not a product of the institution. I am not any of those things. I am Gayogohó, which means that she carries many roads. And I am from the Wolf Clan family. And my home is in Akwesasne, Gayogohó, people of the flint, the crystal. Those are a little bit of things that I get to take pride in and to come up here and to represent. And the reason why I'm asking you that is because oftentimes we are expected to show up like robots. Stay in your lane, don't talk, don't be different, just follow the rules, just be obedient. Just be well disciplined. That's not me. And I'm hoping it never is. So when I'm talking to you in terms of your inherited titles. You all carry the title that you've inherited. Sister, brother, auntie, uncle, cousin, friend. Those are the greatest titles that you will ever carry, ever. They will speak to your life, to your legacy, to your relationships, to your morale, to your ethics, to your beliefs, to everything, to your essence. How do you treat people that you love? Do you check on them? Do you take care of them? Do you show up when times are hard? Is somebody showing up for you? So what became very clear to me is that the institution came after our families. I very much am intrigued about the word power. I'm very intrigued by that because the word power can mean a lot of things. And a lot of times what I'm working with and I'm dealing with is the spectrum of power and control, which I'm sure you've all known as the power of abuse. So in the spirit of power, and actually right now they say that whatever has your attention has your power. I have a lot of people's attention in the room. I've worked very hard to be at the front of the room and to connect with you in a very human-like way. So I will speak to the mother in you. I will speak to the human being in you. I'm not speaking to your titles, to your institutional accolades. I am speaking to you like human beings because it's a safer place. If I ask you to be a human being, you're probably going to give yourself some grace and you're probably going to give it to somebody else. I have no interest in stature, hierarchy, competition. None of that impresses me because it's been at the root of my genocide. So I came home and I was also given the opportunity to work for Seven Dancers Coalition, where I did work on prevention on sexual assault, domestic violence, campus safety, teen dating, sex trafficking, and stalking. And what became very evident to me was that I was, given this role and responsibility to uplift and empower women and young girls. But what became very evident, it was that I can uplift and empower all the women I want. But if they don't have a counterpart that's also empowered, that's also uplifted, they will still end up in violent relationships. They will still end up being manipulated, and we will still put all the responsibility on the victim. I see very clearly that oftentimes when there is violence, when someone has done something that you didn't want to happen, that you didn't give consent to, that you didn't have permission, there is a loss of power. And I see in the victim over and over again, 95% of the time, take responsibility for the violence that they did not consent to. Because the other party did not take accountability, and in order for there to be justice, there has to be someone to take responsibility, and the victim will take it. And very shortly after, they will then harm themselves. They will self-mutilate. At that point, my attention is not on the person who's harmed her. It's basically on it's getting her to not harm herself for the violence that's been inflicted on her. This happens in multiple settings on very intimate scales and on political scales. So in the means of figuring out intimate violence, political violence, systematic violence, every kind of violence you can think of, it crushed me. I drowned in it. I was drowning in rape. I was drowning in violence. I was drowning in it, and I didn't know what to do. So I left my job. Because every day I woke up with chest pain, every day I had no time for my children, every day I didn't want my partner to touch me, every day. And that wasn't healthy. But I was trying to help my community. I was trying to give them options, and that's what being an advocate taught me, was how do I give you options so that you can find your power again. And I'm still here creating options. Because I want you to be free. I want you to know your power. And I don't want you to give it away, but sometimes it's not about what I want. So with that, I couldn't see any good men. I couldn't see them. I was grieving them. I didn't have them really in my own life, and I didn't see them in the community. And I was very upset that our own family members, our own men, were ensuring the violence that was happening to their own women. So I went on. I didn't know what else to do, so I decided to die. And then my form of death is to go out and to deprive myself for 4 days and 4 nights with no food and no water. And ask that creation, send me a vision, tell me what to do, because I don't know. And I offered 7 kernels of white corn to every direction. I prayed to every direction, to every spirit. Help me. Help the people. And I came out of that fast, and within that year, 7 dancers got a grant, and they were able to support a men's division that year. And I also tried to transition my school of thought about men, and I also tried to take moments to honor the men that were being dads, the men that were being partners. They didn't have to be in leadership, they didn't have to be anything on that scale, they just had to be men that were providing, protecting, procreating, and sometimes they need to punish. So in order to directly keep women and children safe in the community, I had to go to the source of the harm, which was coming from our men. And so where were our men? Where were they vulnerable? Well, then it becomes very evident. You know where people are vulnerable because you just follow the drug dealer. The drug dealer knows how to profit off of people. And so do I. So when people are most vulnerable is when they are in transit, when they are transitioning from one place to another, which is a lot of times for our men is coming out of jail, coming out of rehabs, finding a place to live. We have a lot of systematic oppression, shortage of housing, shortage of resources, and yet we astronomically scale all of these adversities. So what I did was I decided to build homes. This is where the tiny home project comes into play, because there was no services coming home. To this day, there is no direct service for anybody coming out, and yet New York State is our leading incarcerator. The New York State Police incarcerates Indigenous people at higher rates than anybody else in the state. And why would they want to incarcerate us? Well, because it extracts us from our community, it extracts us from our families, and it creates more trauma and harm, therefore more power and control. Therefore, by the time I get them, they're completely infused with violence. And to be honest with you, I'm really tired of cleaning up my own genocide. I am tired of begging for grants, begging for money, begging for a salary, begging for anything, when I am the victim. And why am I taking full accountability for the harm that has been done to me? Where is the accountability from the state, from the institution, Cornell? This institution is the #1 leading institution that has taken land from these children sitting right here. The very building that we're standing on belongs to these girls right here, and they took it from them. I want to know, where's the accountability from the president of this institution, from its leadership? Where is your accountability to these children who did not ask for this, who did not give permission? Their mothers gave you no permission to come here and take their future from them. I have no problem challenging the institution, because the institution is very interested in making sure that I don't know who I am, that I don't have a belief system, that I don't have, a lot of things. But I've already died multiple times. And you know what's great about death? There's no more fear. You took my language, you took my land, took my community, you take my men. I have no choice but to get up here and tell you the truth. It is that urgent, it is that necessary. This is a privilege to come up here and barely speak to you, barely skim the surface of the harm that is happening right now. I am not up here to entertain you. I am not up here to impress you. I am up here to give you truth, humility, humility and humanness. And they really didn't want us to be in relationship with each other. They really don't want you to wrap your minds around the fact that your mother is your first home. You are a water creature for 9 months before you take a breath of air. We are all bodies of water with a fire inside of us, which is why hopefully we're all about 97 degrees right now. Who's teaching you that? Who's teaching you to go outside and hug those trees, to put your heart next to a tree? Who's teaching you to give thanks to the people? Who's teaching you to remember the birds and the waters and the plants and the animals? Who's teaching you to wake up to yourself? To you. Not who somebody wants you to be, not what position you need to fill in an institute. Who's telling you to be you? A human being. We have the blueprint to that. We have a protocol to peace. 1,000 years. 1,000 years of teaching you how to be peaceful. And the more we've done that, the more we've been slaughtered for it. 250 years ago, when this ununited states came together, there was 124 million indigenous people here. We barely skimmed 5 million between the United States, the ununited states, and Canada. Where did those 120 million indigenous people go? While everybody was extremely comfortable reaping the benefits of our ways and our land. We are genocide survivors. Genocide. And it's very important for you to not know that. There's a lot of people who have spent a lot of time and a lot of money making sure you don't know that, so that you don't hear from me. I wasn't supposed to live long enough to be up here to speak to you, but they can't kill me because I'm a representative of love from a uterine line of mothers. My school of thought comes from a Bear Clan mother who took me in, who gave me time and space, who taught me how to transform myself, who told me to believe when I couldn't. I didn't know how to see, to walk to the land with response. I didn't know how to see. I was still 11G0437, property of New York State. I come here with authenticity. And if you like people that are authentic and genuine, I'm your gal. I really am. And I'm extending this invitation. I'm extending an invitation to you. I'm here to speak to you about something. I'm here to support. I'm here to believe in reciprocity. I'm also here to uplift these children. I'm also here to show them that it's possible to experience violence and not let it tell you who you are. I want you to know that. I also want you to know that I come here. I also, we had visitors that came from Gayogohó lands, and they came with children and women and men, and they said, we need help. We need help. There's somebody attacking us right now. And so I came out here, and my first thought was to interview their children, because if anybody's going to tell you the truth, it's children. If anybody knows what we need to do, it's children. They have no political agenda. They don't care if you're a Democrat, a liberal, you're from the moon, you're from the Mars, they don't care. They just want you to get along. They just want you to be happy. They just want to be safe. So I went and interviewed their children, and that's how I got to know a lot of these beautiful faces up here. And I told them that I work for them, and I needed them to tell me what to do, and they said, we need help because nobody's here. Nobody's here protecting us. Everybody wants to praise the glorified Indian. But what happens in real time when their homes are being threatened, when their livelihood, when their mothers are being beaten by mercenaries and their aunts and their grandmothers? And everybody just lets it happen. Oh, that has nothing to do with me. Well, it has a lot to do with you because you're literally standing on what's rightfully theirs. So I was saying, so I listen. I take the time to listen. I don't get up here just to talk. I take the time to listen. Because in order to be able to be a good speaker, you also have to be a good listener. And so I listened to these kids, and they were telling me, one of my nieces up here was telling me that she wanted to talk to somebody. She wanted to talk to somebody about what she was going through. She wanted to speak to the pain that she was experiencing. And she went to school. She thought she had a teacher that she could trust. She thought this teacher cared about her. She thought that the teacher was gonna, so that the teacher that she's building this relationship with asks her, can you tell me about your longhouse? And so she begins to tell her, well, this is our longhouse, and we had it until this individual tore it down. And the teacher stopped her and said, I don't want to hear nothing about him. Just tell me about your longhouse. So how interesting it is when non-Indigenous people just want to know about our ways, just want to know about our longhouse, but when we get up here and talk about real things happening in real time, I don't want to hear it. This was last month. So I also know that the institution is also about indoctrination. And we know this because of the concentration camps that they built, because I don't know how many of you heard about the 10,000 babies that were unearthed in the northern portion of this continent. Have you been hearing about that? Probably not. 10,000 babies in only 17 schools. There was 120-something schools. They've only looked at 17 of them. They found 10,000 babies buried in mass graves. Who's educating anybody about that? They didn't even hit this side of the imaginary border yet. So now we know where those 120 million Indigenous people went. So in school, I learned all about genocide. I read Anne Frank's book. I felt her story. I felt her, I felt everything. That I was totally appalled by what happened to them. Not even knowing that there's no difference between me and her. I'm here to talk about transformational justice. Not criminal justice, not just restorative justice, transformational justice. How do we become better people as a result of the harm that's being done? How do we change the entire way that we live? This isn't just about restoring justice. This is about being transformed by it. And so that becomes deeply frustrating to a lot of people when not only were we indoctrinated, but everybody across the tracks has been. So the reason why they had those schools, because they knew that the sooner you could get the children. So get this, why would any government, think about it, why would any government specifically target children and rip them from their families and put them in concentration camps where they raped them, beat them, burned them, murdered them, molested them, made them work in gardens to grow fruit that they couldn't even eat. They were not allowed to eat the fruit that they were forced to grow. It is sick. And nobody, your 4th grade social studies teacher, is not teaching you this. Why? Why? Narrative is extremely important. Why? Ask yourself that. Why would anybody keep that information from you? Why would anybody keep the truth from you? Do you want to know? Do you really want to know? So I don't leave my family, myself, to waste my time and just come up here and, be another spectacle in front of the room. This is real. My family's on the line. And I'm pretty sure every single one of you, if someone was coming after your kids, if someone was coming after your community, if someone was coming after your very existence, what would you do? I'm sure there's a lot of things. I'm sure violence runs through your mind. And I'm still here trying to hold myself to the Gayogohó, trying to hold myself to protocols, to peace with my own community. I took an oath to myself to not fight my own people. So I'm just wanting to sit here, and I wanted to accredit all the women that have taken me in, all the families that have taken me in, all the mothers that I have today, all the sisters that I have today, all the Gayogohó people in the room. I see you. I stood up here the whole time Louise was talking. I looked for you. You're a good group of good-looking people. I just want to say. So sometimes I have to heal, and you know what I do? I go take a bath. I put a lot of salt in the bath. I try to clean off. And this one time I was taking my bath and I pulled my head back. I pulled my ears under the water. And the only thing I could hear was my heartbeat. Bubble, 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 bubble. I'm like, how come when I'm not underwater I can't hear my heartbeat? And then I realized it reminded me of marching, women marching, 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 marching. Because you know what happens when you're in your mother's belly? It's not your heartbeat that you're hearing, it's hers. So I can tell, I can get up here and tell you all the great things I've done. I can also get up here and tell you all the not so great things I've done. But I'm a real person who's going through real things, who's ready to have a real conversation with real people. I don't have a hidden agenda, other than to make sure that none of these young girls up here believe that they're supposed to accept violence as a way of life. I'm here trying to let them know that I got your back. I made you a promise. And I'm going to keep it for as long as I possibly can. This is who I work for. And nobody's going to hold me more accountable than they will. Nobody is going to speak to the work that I've done like these girls will. And I want them to get up here and say, I come from a long line of powerful women who didn't give up. Am I out of time, Leslie? I usually am. Okay, so I've dumped a lot of emotion on you, and I'm unapologetic for it. I'm not apologizing for anything. This is who I am. This is who I continue to want to be, and I'm going to continue to evolve. And I just want to say, Jonel Louise, for everything that you've taught me, for taking the time to be my mother, and for always making it a point to tell me how much I was worth when I couldn't. So with that, I will say, no, I'll go on. I wrap you in my medicine.
So yeah, young Janelle, wow. It's me right here. And I always said to Janelle, let me love you until you can love yourself. And she has arrived at a place where she loves herself. But I just wanted to put one more thing in here, Leslie. Cornell has a debt to pay. With you there. Through the Moral Act, or the Moral Land Grab. This is the wealthiest academic institution in the United States based on stolen lands, Indian lands. And they need to be made accountable. And they need to stop stonewalling us at the high levels of this institution because they know the truth. So anybody in this room who has a connection to the Senate or to the upper brass of Cornell, let them know Janelle and Mama Bear's coming. And we're gonna keep on coming and we're not gonna stop until the truth prevails.